You guys did a very good job answering the do now question, which I enjoyed listening to your answers. Many of you guys said what the question was, just a reminder, was which branch of government do you believe is the most powerful branch of government? Many of you guys said the presidency, which arguably there could be a good argument made for that. However, I would have to strongly disagree. So, there's three branches of government in the United States. We've discussed two in depth so far. We've discussed the legislature branch, or Congress, at the federal level. They make the laws. They have the power of oversight, the power of the purse, the power to declare war. Okay. They pass laws, and the president can veto or sign them. The president signs a law. The president is in the executive branch is responsible for executing the laws and enforcing the laws. One branch of government we have not discussed yet, but we will, and that's the idea of this unit, is the judicial branch and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the land. It has the power to interpret laws. And the judicial branch is kind of complex, but we will break it down in this unit. You have the Supreme Court, which is the highest court of the land. Highest court. Then you have the circuit courts, or sometimes referred to as the appellate courts. They act as a court of, they're formerly known as the Court of Appeals. And then the last tier of this, there are more courts in between, but we won't get into that. But these are the three main courts of the federal judiciary and the district courts. The district courts are where all federal lawsuits and litigation begins, in the district courts. Each state has a district court. In our state of Connecticut, we have a district court. Many other states have multiple district courts. I believe there's like 99 district courts, but I would have to double check that number. So once a case is brought from the district court, it will be brought. People at the district court involved in the lawsuit, if they don't like the outcome of the district court's ruling, they can appeal to the appellate courts or the Court of Appeals, and they can decide whether to uphold the district court's ruling or rule differently. If they want a farther appeal, but usually it has to have a good constitutional question at hand. The people involved in the lawsuit can appeal to the highest court in the land, which is the Supreme Court. And that's going to be the focus of our lesson, is the Supreme Court. The best way to study the Supreme Court is by looking at landmark cases to study the institution. The institution is always making decisions, important decisions. When you look at American history, and especially the Civil Rights Movement, Brown versus Board of Ed, that was the Supreme Court ruling. The Supreme Court ruling, segregation, separate is not equal. That segregation was wrong, and it turned over a previous court case. Recently, you want to look at abortion. Abortion was legalized by a Supreme Court ruling. Gay marriage was also legalized by the Supreme Court. Not Congress, not the president, but the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's rulings has a tremendous effect on everyday people and on government policies. The Supreme Court can rule a law constitutional or unconstitutional. However, the court was not set up that way. And I will get into the presentation about the function of the Supreme Court after I go over the functions of the Supreme Court. you guys will study you guys will make a website. You guys will work in groups of 2 or 3. And you guys will conduct some research on a landmark case. So maybe for example, if you guys got Brown versus Board, what would be the important? You guys would say Brown versus Board. Brown versus Board had overturned segregation and led the charge for the civil rights movement. And you guys can talk about that, or whatever the specifics of your case may be. So the purpose of this is for you guys to understand the Supreme Court by looking through a landmark case instead of me standing up here and lecturing about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's very interesting, and studying the cases, individual cases at hand, is, in my opinion, very fun, and hopefully you guys will enjoy that too. Plus, creating a website to go along with that as well. So without further ado, let me get into the Nearpod presentation on the Supreme Court. And that will be the subject of our lesson today.